Arabella Leyden alighted from a hansom cab 2 blocks from her father's house. The summer sun still hung above the horizon, despite it being well past the hour for supper. She had hoped for a breath of air to clear her head, but the hot and sticky late afternoon air wasn't much better than the stuffy confines of the cab. Regardless, she walked the remaining distance. She brushed the wayward strands of her dark brown hair from her sweaty forehead with a sigh, trying not to think of the oppressive heat. She had quite enjoyed high tea with Julian Pattersby, the cerebral young man who had caught her eye. Even the company of his dour maiden aunt as a chaperone hadn't put a damper on their enjoyment. Between bites and exciting conversation about the optimal number of teeth on a cog for various applications, Arabella watched a curious family drama play out between Julian and his impoverished aunt. Aunt Adelaide's frown had deepened each time Julian ordered another pot of tea, but she said not a word. Julian pretended not to notice his aunt slipping part of her meal into the small carpet bag in her lap. No plate left the table with a single scrap of food upon it, and several in a napkin seemed to go missing. Julian paid the exorbitant bill without either concern or complaint. After tea, while Aunt Adelaide was distracted by a spectacular example of pelargoniums on their garden stroll, Julian whispered in Arabella's ear that his uncle from his mother's side forbade him from giving money to his father's side of the family, but never argued over extravagant dining expenses. Deep in thought, Arabella strolled down the sidewalk toward her father's house, a dreamy smile on her lips. Even in the midst of a prickly and potentially embarrassing family matter, Julian showed himself to be kind and generous, a gentle soul. He was an eminently suitable young man. For just a moment, she allowed herself to forget about the dangers and political machinations of the witching world and pondered the romantic possibilities of a young heart. It was in that moment that the perils she sought to distract herself from reinserted themselves. Arabella cried out as heat from something flew past her cheek, missing her by inches. Yanked out of her wool gathering, she saw a witch a few feet ahead of her on the sidewalk. The witch held her flame-wreathed hands away from her body. Arabella gasped. Footsteps sounded on the pavement behind her. Another woman, dressed in the dowdy clothes of a washerwoman, leapt in front of Arabella. The washerwoman's hands twisted in an arcane shape, and the next blast from the snarling fire witch slid over a hastily erected shield. The flame shot up into the sky and dissipated harmlessly. The fire witch shrieked in rage. "Get into the house!" Arabella's savior hissed over her shoulder, even as she kept her eyes on the fire witch. "I'll hold her off." "But what?" Arabella stammered. "Who are you?" "That doesn't matter," she growled through gritted teeth. "Get to the house. You'll be safe behind the wards." The fire witch threw another fireball, and the unknown witch projected her shield out and around it. The fire suffocated in the bubble. "Tabitha?" Arabella's defender called out. "You don't have to do this." "Lies! She cannot be allowed to live!" Tabitha screeched. She hurled another fireball. The mystery witch caught it and snuffed it out again, her movements sure, but she panted from the strain. Tabitha was in between Arabella and her father's house. With a quick glance over her shoulder to make sure no carriages were coming, Arabella dashed across the street. She pelted up the sidewalk, dodging screaming people, running for cover. Her unknown savior had Tabitha completely distracted, but who knew how long that would last? Once she was past Tabitha, Arabella hurried back across the street again. "Almost home," she thought. She gasped when she saw another woman by her father's front gate. She stood transfixed by the battling witches down the street, and seemed not to have noticed Arabella yet. She could be a mundane woman. She could be a witch. If she was a witch, she could be here to either hurt her or protect her. Arabella had no way of knowing. Not wanting to risk it, Arabella darted into the alley and hurried to the back garden gate.